Hello and welcome. I'm Sarah Mueller, a reporter with Forbes, and today I am joined by best-selling author Emily Henry. Emily, thank you so much for joining me. I'm ecstatic to have you here.
Thank you for having me. This is very cool. I'm so happy it worked out.
Yeah, well, okay, obviously you have Funny Story that just came out last week, but some of the other titles you have include Beach Read, which my book club is doing in a couple of months, People We Meet on Vacation, Book Lovers, Happy Place. And so just kind of to get started, all of your releases happen about April, May, right before the summer reading lists start to be made. Tell me about kind of being a summer read for people. How did you kind of get onto that trend?
Yeah, like so many things in life and in publishing, it wasn't just I tripped and that's what happened. Beach Read, I knew I was writing a summary book. I was writing it in the spring when I was just desperate to be like on hot sand with a drink in hand. You know the feeling. You're a Midwest girl, so it's like the seasons just as one is wrapping up, you're just dying for the next one. And so that's what Beach Read was for me, why I was writing that. And we knew from the beginning that we were going to be trying to time the release that way so that people could be like as immersed in the world as possible. And then it just kind of kept happening. It kept happening. And, once I had done 2 books that were sort of vacation-y romances, it made sense to just keep pushing that. And this is the first one that I've written that's more of like a staycation romance, but it's still a summery, warm, inviting read, hopefully.
Yes, and we're going to get into some of those topics because I like to call your books a hug. They feel like a hug to me. So just to get started, I want to talk about Booktok because people can't see it on my part of the Zoom, but I have almost 500 books in this library and I'm heavily influenced to purchase more, which is where I bought a lot of your books from. So talk a little bit about how TikTok has played a role in making a lot of your books popular.
Yeah. It's an amazing thing because publishers spend a lot of time and money trying to figure out how to make books hit. And we talked a little bit before this about pulling back the curtain on publishing. And the truth is that usually publishing is kind of being run with like the tentpole method, where it's like all the resources and money are going to what we call lead titles. And then the hope is that if that title really pops off, the money coming in will allow editors to keep buying other books and supporting other books. But it's like not, an even playing field from the get-go. The cool thing about Booktok is that it is reader driven. And so there have been books that are backlist titles, meaning they came out years ago, that take off there. And it's not because the publisher is necessarily throwing money at them or getting them the best placement in bookstores or what have you. It's really because someone loved what they read so much that they made a video like sobbing about it. And that excitement is contagious. Like as a reader, when you talk to someone who really loves something, of course you want to go check it out and see if you feel the same way. Or even if they're describing it and you're like, that doesn't sound like my thing at all. There's like a different kind of curiosity where you're like, maybe I'll just go see what this is all about. So it's been amazing because Booktok really didn't embrace my books until a little bit after my second book, People We Meet on Vacation, came out. And we suddenly saw this huge spike in sales. And my editor and agent and I were all back channeling, like, did you notice that in this, sales portal thing? Like, what was that? And then I had friends sending me videos of some TikTok creators that were just like raving about the books. And it was so cool to realize that it was being driven by readers. And I've watched since then as every single publisher has sort of scrambled to try and figure out how they can, put something out into the world of Booktok and make it happen. And they haven't, as far as I'm aware, really been able to. It's like really like truly reader driven. And that's very cool.
That is kind of the core of Booktok, is to be reader driven. It's not necessarily this marketing that is highly polished, right? I want to get into some Booktok subjects that have been brought up about your books that I find personally fascinating, which is that some of your plot lines have changed based on where they're published. So there's maybe something that is a little bit different in the UK version of Beach Read than is in the US version. Even the UK title for People We Meet on Vacation is You and Me on Vacation. Can you kind of pull back the curtain for us and tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, sure. So the most pronounced differences in the books happened in the earlier books because I had sold the books to a US publisher. We'd gone through the whole editing process, and then a UK publisher bought rights, and they had some additional thoughts. And so with Beach Read, that was the one with the most distinct thing that Booktok is like, there's two different endings to this book. And I really do genuinely feel like they're both true. They're both right. But you know, they're for different markets. And so there's that piece of things. And there's also the fact of an editor being like, I love this, but if I had been editing it from the beginning, I would have had these questions or what have you. And so that was like the start of Beach Read having kind of this like split. And you know, the longer that we're doing this, the more the UK editors are also involved earlier on and their notes kind of get folded in. So I don't know if there will always be differences, but it is interesting because there are things you just don't really know are so specific to your like market, which is like a depressing way to think of people. But in the US, you know, like in the People We Meet on Vacation US edition, Alex has a vasectomy and he talks about getting a vasectomy. And Alex is also a character who thinks that he probably does want children someday. But he's like, you know what, the odds of like you can have a vasectomy reversed and, you know, things can always go wrong in any procedure of any kind and just in life. But to him, it's worth it to get this vasectomy with the thought of like, I'll reverse it someday when I'm ready to have kids. The UK team was like, very jarred by discussion of a vasectomy. It also happens in kind of an intimate scene. And to me, that's why I like writing like sex scenes and intimate scenes is because they're so raw and vulnerable because it's like you're already doing something that's like a little bit humiliating. You're so exposed literally and figuratively. So it felt like a really natural thing to like talk about this thing that's so personal. But the UK team was like jarred by that and thought like, I don't know if our readers are I think they're going to be worried. Like Alex is sacrificing some piece of himself to make this decision for like the security of his romantic partners. So that was really interesting. And, I had to kind of think through that and find another way to be really true to the characters there, which is a fun challenge. Because to me, the thing about fiction is like, it's not real, but it is true. It's like, that's what makes you feel so connected to something that you weep when you're done, even though you know it didn't really happen. There's like this truth in it that's just unavoidable.
Yeah, one of my friends wrote a review last night for Funny Story and said, I'd love for Emily Henry to write a book where I don't cry. And I can relate to that tremendously. We'll get into this in a second, but I want to talk about the intimacy and the romance aspect of this. I mean, I think it's so interesting because as a romance reader myself and as somebody who enjoys books, I feel like we're kind of seeing this surge right now of like not being shy about reading, you know, maybe some scandalous scenes or talking about the intimacy in these scenes. And so what is that like for you as somebody who's also coming from a business perspective and, you know, like you said, working with editors, trying to come up with a solution that works for the market, but the market is currently changing, it feels like, in that respect.
It's constantly changing. And again, that's something that's reader driven. I think the reason that we're seeing so much more vocal embracing of romance is because every generation has sort of like different hangups and traumas. And with Booktok, you can really see it because especially younger readers, I'm thinking like probably Gen Z, you just see there's like a different, I don't know. I'm sure it's still very personal person to person, but overall, I feel like there's so much less shame about loving this kind of story. It's like you're not seeing people self-deprecate about it and be like, yeah, I like romance. And I know that's like uncool. And even the way that they'll talk about sex scenes, like they'll share excerpts of their favorite sex scenes and romantic moments. And there isn't the same shame attached to it that I definitely grew up with and was well aware of. Like I didn't even pick up a romance novel until I was an adult because I just assumed I wouldn't like it based on kind of the societal perception of the genre and its value. So again, I think so much of the change we're seeing is being driven by the readers. And I love that they embrace that kind of scene because I really think, you know, maybe not for everyone, but for a lot of us, sex and physical intimacy is a huge part of our relationships, of our romantic relationships. And the things that you say in those moments are significant, and the ways that you like bare your heart in those moments are significant. And it's just hard to write a story about people really falling in love and getting to that place of deep connection without some, kind of physical version of that. At least for me. I know there are writers who do it, but for me, it's like it's kind of an integral part of their growth and transformation.
Now let's get to a funny story. This is a story about two people who have been scorned now by their exes. They end up as roommates, and maybe some fake dating occurs, So I had such a blast reading it. It was so fun. But I love describing your books as a hug to women in their late 20s and early 30s. There's something about it because there's so much character depth to this. So if you were to tell me, who do you feel like this book is a hug to for an audience member?
Oh my gosh. I want it to be, that's kind of the thing is when I write them, I don't necessarily know yet who it's really for. With Harriet in Happy Place, my last book, I thought, oh, this book is really for people pleasers. And I think it was. But I also got a lot of feedback from readers who specifically connected with Harriet's family dynamic. And I've kind of seen the same thing with Daphne. Like her thing, the thing that I really wanted readers to embrace and accept is that the way that other people treat you is not necessarily an indication of your value. Like everybody's dealing with their own shit. The things that we do are because of us, not because of other people. And with Daphne, she's had this complicated relationship with her father, especially where he dotes and then withdraws and kind of withholds in a lot of ways. And it's left her with this wound of feeling like she's never going to be someone's top choice or priority. And a lot of, I feel like the decisions she's been making in her life are because she wants to sort of like suture up that wound. So I think it's for people who have felt that way, who felt like they're never going to be picked. I think that's a feeling that a lot of us can relate to.
One of the things I love about your books is the kind of secondary relationships, other than the romantic ones, always kind of reflect what's going on. Specifically, Happy Place, I've recommended to so many people who are, especially late 20s, early 30s, post-college, trying to figure out how to grow up with your friends, right? Not just the person you love, maybe that you met during that time, but also growing with your friends. And so where does that kind of come from? How do you find a way to bring in those other relationships into the storyline that is not just the romantic one?
Yeah, well, I think they're always so tightly braided together. And, with Happy Place, it was this character, Harriet, who has been through a lot of life with this partner, and she is kind of wrestling with the idea that maybe they're growing apart, irrevocably. And that's so indicative of where she's at in life, because she's feeling those same things with her friends and those same things with her dreams, like these dreams that she's held onto so tightly for all of her childhood and adolescence. And now feeling like that tension of, is that even what I really want? It's all tied together. And with Daphne and Miles in Funny Story, it's a similar thing. Like from the beginning, I knew that this was a book about a woman who had built her whole life around a relationship that she thought was stable and steady. And so her friendships, where she lives, her furniture, like the restaurants she eats at, all of that was built around this other person. And so when you pull that person out of the picture, it's like a Jenga tower and you've taken the most integral block. And so I knew from the very beginning, Daphne's journey was not just going to be about like getting over her ex and maybe falling in love. It was going to be about rebuilding her life and rebuilding a life that would be hers no matter what happened, that no one person could take it from her. And so the book is largely also a friendship book, because she's like falling in love, but also she's making friends on her own for the first time since she was like in her mid-20s, which is so hard as an adult, by the way.
Absolutely. And like that concept of reclaiming, I think a beach read, which is extremely emotional, kind of this concept of finding out that your parents and the people you looked up to aren't perfect, and coming to terms with that. And the reclaiming of these characters is so important in all of your storylines. Now I want to switch because some of this is coming to the big screen, possibly soon. So in the last 2 years, you've had announcements that 3 of your books, Beach Read, People We Meet on Vacation, and Book Lovers, are getting film adaptations. First of all, tell me about how you got that news and how you reacted, because I can imagine finding out that your story is going to be, extended is incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it was very surreal. I think with Beach Read, we had originally set it up with a different team before the book even came out. And so that felt like, okay, wow, this is really happening. This book, it felt like a sign that the book was going to be something bigger than I'd been expecting. And then that like option clause lapsed and we wound up with a new team I'm very excited about. But yeah, I mean, I feel like it's weird because the way that it usually works, like in the past, the way that it's worked is like maybe one producer, one studio raises their hand and they're like, we're interested. Do you want to take a meeting? You take that meeting and you're like, yes, let's try and do it. And then it either does or doesn't happen. With this, it was interesting because when the books really popped, there were a lot more people coming to the table. And so it was doing a lot of meetings back to back and seeing a lot of different visions. And it was really cool to realize there were so many different ways that every single one of these adaptations could play out, because at their heart, adaptations are collaborations, whereas a book is much more just like your vision from the beginning to the end. So it was definitely surreal. It was definitely very surreal, overwhelming, and like kind of fogged over in my memory even. Like I don't think I could really take it in when it was happening. It was like, just kind of like an out-of-body experience, honestly.
Now, obviously, there are rumors out there about who's going to be cast in these adaptations, but what can you tell us about the adaptation process so far?
I mean, I feel bad because I keep saying the same things, which is that I've read scripts and the scripts are great. I really am like not even sure what I'm allowed to share. I can say that they're all moving. I genuinely feel that they're all moving. Some are moving faster and with more momentum than others. I'm really excited. There are things that I would theoretically be able to announce, but I don't understand the timeline of Hollywood. So who knows?
How involved are you with the scripting process? I guess I'm kind of curious, just as somebody who like created and loves this story. I mean, how much can you say, yes, I want to change this, or no, I don't want to change this? How much of a hand do you have?
Well, it's really different from team to team. I've found that, and that's been a really interesting thing where it's like some really kind of just want the thing and they want you to just like, let go and let God and then come back when it exists. Others really have invited my input. And, I try really hard to not be precious about them, because at the end of the day, obviously I want the readers to be really happy, but I also want these movies to be movies that stand on their own. And we have other more experienced people in the rooms to make sure that happens. So I would say like Yulin Kwong, who is the screenwriter for, I mean, at different stages, everybody has involved me. But Yulin, I feel like she is such a reader at her heart. And she also just had a book come out. That's amazing. But she definitely invites my input. And, it's like it's like the editing process where you start to learn the things that you don't budge on and the things that you can let go and leave room for change and growth. So, it's different for each. I would say definitely after watching 3 kind of unfold, I am itching to be more involved and to do like my own adapting at some point down the road, because as like exciting as it is to see other people do your their own version of your work, of course there is also the feeling of like, ooh, how would I handle this? Like, what would I do? So we'll see.
And so rounding out our interview, I want to ask, what is kind of the next story or the next maybe setting or even, characters that you're looking to do moving forward?
Yeah, that's actually great because I keep being asked about this and I don't have answers I'm allowed to give. But setting, I can say that the next book setting is largely California and then like a little island on the East Coast. There's a little bit of setting. There's multiple settings, but that's kind of what's going on. And what else can I say about it? I mean, I feel like it's really true to what I love most about writing, which I think and hope readers will love, like if they've loved what I've done so far, or the ones who have. But it also feels like a departure, which is really exciting for me to feel like I'm taking what I love most, but trying a slightly different spin on it. And there still is a romance. So that much I can confirm.
Of course, we need a romance. Before I let you go, I've got some rapid fire questions for you. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Awesome. You love romantic comedy movies from what I've seen. What's your favorite one? Your like go-to?
Probably You've Got Mail.
Wonderful choice. Which of your characters do you feel like you've related to the most?
Whichever one I'm writing at that moment, truly.
What's your favorite book trope for you to read?
Ooh, a really good enemies to lovers.
A classic, of course. Who was your favorite couple to write?
Ooh, I think maybe either Poppy and Alex or Charlie and Nora. Both of those were really fun to write. They weren't like as angsty. They were just really fun.
What genre do you want to try and write that you haven't yet?
Ooh, well, I haven't published in many genres. I've written in a lot. I would like to someday try to write thrillers and sci-fi again in some capacity.
What type of music kind of helps inspire your writing process?
Oh my gosh. I don't listen to music while I'm writing, but I think a lot of like the older, kind of like folky, rocky classics, and there's Neil Young references in this book, and I feel like he's kind of a go-to.
Yeah, all the sad music that our hero listens to and funny story. And then what is a current book you're reading or a book from another author that you would recommend right now?
Well, I'm currently finally reading the first book in the Southern Reach trilogy by Jeff Vandermeer, Annihilation. I just rewatched the movie, loved it. The book is totally different, so that's really fun. I'm also about to start reading a book that's not out yet, but it's called Park Avenue by Renee Adier, and I think it's her adult debut. I'm very excited. She published YA that was lovely before this, so that will be out for a while, but put it on your radars.
Awesome. Emily Henry, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.